4 million years later.
Hi there. Thank you for downloading and listening to the 4 Million Years Later podcast, a show where two old friends get together and watch an episode of the Generation 1 Transformers cartoon series in order, story order. We'll talk about that more in a second. And then convene to talk about what they saw from the perspective of two people who grew up watching the show a lot as children, continued to watch the show a lot as teenagers, as young adults, and now as somewhat older adults continuing to watch the show and talk about how our relationship with it from all those different perspectives. My name is Jersey Drost. I am a cartoonist and teaching artist, and the other host is named...
I am Unchanging Hoover.
I was wondering what you're going to do for this one. Good to talk with you again, Unchanging Hoover. What episode are we doing then, if that is your name?
Well, coincidentally, we're doing Changing Gears.
Wait a minute. I went to Tubi TV. I looked at the back of my Rhino DVDs, and this is not the episode that came after Autobot Spike.
Correct. However, we're basically following a slightly altered script order. So this is not the order that they aired on TV. It's kind of the order that the scripts went in, but basically we're doing story order, which is open to a little bit of interpretation. So if you're confused, you can come to our Facebook group. There'll be a post about exactly what order we're doing things in. And it's basically script order except for when episodes clearly take place either before or after one another. So it's just going to be that. So just listen in, and we'll always announce what our next episode is going to be at the end, so you can follow along that way.
Quiz us about the proper order and say, well, actually, to your heart's content. But none of the gentle people who listen to this podcast would ever do that, because you want to know why, Hoover?
Why?
Because they followed the example set forth by Chip Chase, and they know, operate with goodness in your heart. You know, how do you get to be more like Prime? Hang out with Chip. He'll make you better. Hoover's like, disagree. So, Changing Gears is this week's episode, and we're in season 2 now. I have some 1,000-foot view things. I have a sort of clarification / retraction to make. In season 1 of the series, when we were doing those episodes, I was remarking a lot about the music and about the Transformers soundtrack, and how a lot of those tracks vanish as of season 2. But here we are, 2 episodes in, and a lot of that soundtrack from the original first miniseries is still here. I'm going to keep my ears open now for later on in the series, where we start getting into that sort of generic-y sounding orchestral music that they start using for both G.I. Joe and Transformers. But for now, we're still got like the orchestral / synth / electric guitar soundtrack. It's cool that I'm noticing it more because we're being so deliberate in the way we watch these episodes. Also, another 10,000-foot view. This one is another example of, I wouldn't call it supremely stellar animation, but everything is really, really on model, and all the shots are really well set up so that it doesn't matter as much that the animation isn't exquisite. Like, it's just a good looking episode. And I almost feel like it's a shame because it's about an Autobot, and it's mostly about an Autobot that you enjoy razzing on more than anything else. Why couldn't this be an episode all about Rumble and have this level of production quality, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many like stills that you could take from this episode that are just great looking shots of Megatron and Soundwave and so on. Yeah, for whatever reason, this episode just looks really good.
Yeah, and but story wise, I would say it's okay. It's an okay episode.
It's fun. It's a nice character piece.
Yeah.
I really enjoy character pieces in general. To me, it's more fun if sort of the character sort of outshadows the plot, and they do a good job with this one merging sort of the plot and the character, having the characterization come directly out of the plot.
Yeah, and that is something that Sunbow shows when they're at their best. They excel at that. We talk a lot in the series about how Sunbow suggests but never delivers on the suggestion, which sounds like a critique, which we never mean it to be a critique. I actually think it's a feature, not a bug of the series. But one of the things that the really good episodes of any Sunbow cartoon series usually has what I would call character-driven plot. Like the stuff that's happening is as a result of the way the characters feel and the way they react to the world, and you can't just like switch them out like Monopoly pieces, right?
Yeah.
But I do have to wonder if this episode also was the title created first and then the plot was figured out. Only because like when you see like, okay, there's a character named Gears, what can I do with that? Oh, let's do an episode called Changing Gears. Changing Gears, it's a pun. We change gears when we drive, a car, and he's a car, and his name is Gears. Well, how would we change him? Well, let's read his file card. Oh, he's a very grumpy fella. I don't know. But who wrote this one?
Well, this one was written by Larry Parr, and that is a new name for us here, because he only writes 2 Transformers episodes, this, and much later in the season, Revenge of Bruticus.
Whoa.
But he also wrote for Smurfs, Plastic Man, The Get Along Gang, Dino Riders, Inhumanoids, the original TMNT cartoon. He wrote the original Pride of the X-Men cartoon.
Whoa.
So he was all over animation back in the 80s.
Wow. Thank you, Larry Parr. Let's look at the log line for this episode. Here it comes. The Decepticons set up a trap for the Autobots and kidnap Gears. Now, with Gears as his slave, Megatron creates a solar needle in order to steal the sun's energy, but the consequences could be disastrous. Okay, we're fully in the routine of a Transformers episode now. I was just having a discussion with my friend Zach Giolongo, who asked me, like, what comprises like a good Transformers episode? And I forgot, I didn't have the presence of mind to suggest the formula that Megatron should have a plan to do something wild that creates a lot of energy, but it's going to wind up destroying the Earth. And probably Starscream is going to at one point or another say, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. And then Megatron mocks him for mocking his plan and then reiterates his plan because he likes hearing himself talk. There is the Decepticon half of a Transformers episode, at least the first couple seasons. A solar needle. I can't wait to see how this one forms. So where do we begin? I'm assuming Victor Caroli shows up and said, in the desert, Megatron builds a solar needle.
We open on a strange scene, and we get like a long shot of a cave. And we don't hear Victor Caroli.
Oh.
We hear a strange someone shouting about how they're rich and they found gold.
So we're looking at prospectors.
We see 2 people pushing an entire mine cart full of gold out of the cave. And the pair keep cheering and celebrating until a third rushes over and points to the sky. Who is it? It's our 3 favorite F-15s, Starscream, Thundercracker, and Skywarp. Instantly, they fire on the men and blow up the entire cart of gold. Then, transforming and landing, they fire at the fleeing humans, collapsing the mine on top of one of them.
Yeah, like one of the guys runs into the mine to get away from the Decepticons, and like they shoot in there, and we see all the debris, like the cave-in happens, and then like there's like this quick little like truck in where we zoom in on the debris as it's fallen, as if to suggest, yeah, he's dead.
Yeah, but don't worry too much about him. We'll see him again in a minute. So Soundwave lands next to the Seekers, and he dispatches Laserbeak, who attacks one of the humans who is attempting to radio for help. He then unleashes Ravage, and Ravage goes into that cave where the collapse just happened, and he ferrets out the human trapped inside.
Well, hold on. We gotta see exactly what this looks like, because he jumps over the debris, and the guy's just on the other side, and he picks up a stick to defend himself, and Ravage like bites the stick, and then the next thing you see is Ravage is dragging the guy out by the feet from the cave. Now, I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but when the guy is like in the cave, his shirt's open. Like he does not wearing an undershirt. He's just like got like a button down that's just wide open so you can see his manly chest sitting out. But when Ravage is dragging him out, he's on his belly, and all I could think of is like, ow, 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 rocks, and all sorts of gravel's getting up in all of his business on his chest. That's not good.
So a robot jaguar pulling out of a cave, you're like, but getting your belly dragged along the ground, you're like, oh my God!
Well, don't you remember when you were a kid, you would fall down on the playground in some gravel and it would get stuck under your skin and stuff? Ouch! That's all I'm thinking about. But anyway, yes, Ravage drags the dude back. And can we talk about the way Soundwave is ejecting his cassettes too? So the first one he does it the traditional way. He touches his shoulder and then his chest opens up. The second one, he like starts doing like this weird like YMCA kind of thing where he holds both arms up in the air and like does like this power thrust with his elbows down.
He doesn't really get his emotions across with his voice. He's one of those people who talks with his hands.
I see. It also give you like a Power Rangers kind of vibe. You know, like when the Power Rangers all talk to each other in their costumes, how they gesticulate a lot. He's doing that. But then also, after they bring out the people, he's like, all right, go home. Which that's something I don't feel like we get to see a lot in this series, is the cassettes returning.
Yeah, usually they get to hang out and partake in the goings on. But he's like, okay, guys, you're done. Go back to sleep.
Yeah. Go home, my little family of cassettes that live in my torso. And then we see the guy, and he's like, what is he, like, in a tank top? He's got a mustache and curly hair. It's like he's like Mario the Miner from Super Mario Land. And he's like trying to call for help on the phone, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the third guy, he has not been brought back to the Decepticons.
Yeah.
Megatron lands, and he asks for a report from Starscream. And Starscream says they've captured all but one of the humans, as Starscream takes aim at the last one trying to radio for help. However, he is smacked by Megatron before he can get a shot off. Megatron says he must be allowed to call for help, as it's his plan. And the trembling man uses the radio to call for help.
Okay, how do you feel about that smack?
Awesome.
It's like Megatron just like cross bodies him, you know? It's like Starscream sitting there with his gun pointed, and Megatron crosses the whole screen to knock Starscream down there's no wind up, there's no like hold it you fool, just like pow, you're on the ground.
Yeah. It's not the greatest smack Megatron ever lays on Starscream, but it's pretty good. Pretty good.
I wanted to underline that because I know that as I was watching, I was like, that was a moment that sparked joy in my friend Hoover. So, and like, right after he does it, he just stands up straight again. He's like, it's part of my plan. It's like, this is just like a matter-of-fact day for Megatron.
Yeah,
Well,
it's just Wednesday.
Yeah, he's got a clipboard, and it's like, get up, make 2 eggs, check in on Soundwave, hit Starscream, make crazy plan to destroy the Earth to collect energy. So as the guy's calling for help, who's he calling?
Well, we cut to the Ark, where Teletran is going nuts, and Prime deduces what's going on from Teletran's beeps and boops. He assembles everyone at once, and we see everyone running to meet Prime.
And we get this unusually animated scene where everybody's running down a hallway, and the hallway's animated. Like normally in these old 80s cartoons, the backgrounds are static paintings that these cel-shaded characters move across. But every once in a while, it'll animate the background too. And this is one of those shots where it's a 1-point perspective shot looking down a hallway in Autobot headquarters as Autobots are just running toward the camera. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, Gears is trotting along.
Yeah, when we see Gears, it's very clear that Gears is just calmly walking while literally everyone else is running and rushing.
Yeah.
So Gears starts complaining that he was in the middle of lubing his squeaking cable relays. And Ironhide and Bumblebee come across him, and they both give Gears some grief as they pass. In fact, Bumblebee, what would you call what Bumblebee does in this scene?
He does a sort of a vault over him. Isn't that the Olympic term? When you like vault over a horse, you know? But he also like incorporates a backflip into it, like where he jumps up in the air and puts his hands on Gears' shoulders and like brings his legs over and like flips over top of him as he's talking. So yeah, you hear him if you're just listening to audio, you hear him like grunt as he's doing it, right?
So then, as he passes, Bumblebee says,
"Your squeaking's not the problem. It's your squawking."
So here they're sort of reiterating, hey guys, in case you can't remember what Gears' deal is, Gears complains. Gears has only had speaking roles in like, I don't know, 4 or 5 episodes or something like that.
And it's always been like a line or two, except for Fire in the Sky. He had like a handful of lines, right?
Yeah. What they're reiterating here is that, hey, remember Gears? He's a complainer.
Yep. Wouldn't you know it? This is also Don Messick's time to shine because he doesn't get a lot of characters in the series. At least he doesn't get a lot of main characters. So like to have an episode all about him feels like, okay, this is the big Don episode. But it also, cute sort of, I don't know how much the time you spent with your grandparents as a young person, but like
a lot.
Okay. So like in my grandparents, I spent a good amount of time with them when I was young, and there was a substantial amount of physical ailment litany complaints. So I definitely identified with this whole like, wouldn't you know it, just when I'm getting ready to put my feet in some Epsom salts, my ligaments and blah blah blah. He's doing that, but he's doing like the Cybertronian version. Your pulleys don't squeak like my squeak. So, but then they all assemble in sort of, what would you call it, like the main room of Autobot headquarters where Teletran 1 is.
The living room.
The living room. And like they took care to show Gears push through the crowd and like sort of stand in front of the other little mini bots. And and I'm like, Cliffjumper, you're gonna put up with that?
Prime informs his bunch that the Decepticons are attacking a mining camp. So off they go, transforming and rolling out.
Interesting shot here too. It's like a 3/4 down shot, sort of like a security camera video vantage point, watching the Autobots run out of the base. And most of the time so far, whenever we see Optimus transform, they're reusing the same animation, that famous shot of him transforming from robot to truck or vice versa, where we're roughly about like at the eye level of his chest.
Yeah.
But this one, they actually, it just struck me that it's worth remarking that, wow, we don't often get to see him transform from a different viewing angle. And here's one of those times. And yeah, we see all the Transformers like sort of like parading by the camera. Tell your parents, kids.
Buy all our playsets and toys!
Yeah, you see just about every Autobot in this episode at some point. Except for Skyfire, but we'll touch on him in a bit.
Okay.
But like all the other Autobot cars, they're usually seen at some point in this episode. There's, I think, like Prowl and maybe one or two others are not in any shot, but most of them are here at one point. So an undetermined amount of time later, as per usual, they arrive at the edge of a cliff where they transform as Prime shushes them all.
Yeah, describe what he does here. This is interesting.
He puts his index finger to his quote-unquote mouth, and he makes this sound, which does not really sound like a sush.
No, it sounds like a vehicle tire that's leaking air. It's like shh. It does. It sounds so much like a shush. It's like, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like just blowing in something.
And he like looks both ways when he does it. Like, okay, all of you.
No one really ever taught Prime how to quiet his troops, apparently. I think this is what the humans do. I put my finger up and I blow. I would say this is the weirdest part of the episode because it's like he silently instructs them to go places. They crawl on their belly and peer over the cliff to spy on the valley below, where Skywarp is watching over the two humans kept in an electrified cage. And Starscream asks Megatron for permission to terminate the puny creatures. Prime silently points, and Wheeljack, Gears, and Hound run off to intervene.
Yeah, this feels like, and the animation isn't up to the task, but it feels like it's supposed to be like a commando raid kind of thing, where like they're like on the periphery of where the enemy is, and they're like signaling to each other, okay, you go over there, and then you three go 50 feet over there.
Yeah.
But like, it's just, instead of doing like a thing where like they slap their wrist and point 3 times and then do like point to their eye and then point to their shoe or whatever kind of signaling they do, I'm not in the military, I'm like defaulting to like baseball signaling.
It's all the same. I'm sure that's what they use in the Army.
Certainly. Absolutely. But instead it's like sort of whittled down to he points and then they go do that thing. But it feels like it's supposed to be that moment, right?
Yeah. And we hear Megatron say the humans are of no concern, and he and Starscream are suddenly blasted from where they stand by Prime's rifle.
Now, in your version of this, like if you wrote this episode, would Starscream have said, then why did you hit me earlier?
I don't think in any of my stories Starscream would ever question why Megatron is hitting him at this point. He just accepts it as what it is, another day ending in Y. He's like, they're of no concern to me. Blam! Then they fall down, and Prime stands up, and he says, Autobots charge down the hill. So they're like up on high ground, and they're coming down. Prime gives the order to attack, and the Autobots charge. And the weird thing is, those 3 Autobots who just ran away are shown right next to Prime, and then they run down the hill with him. So it's like, what was that whole runaway scene for.
This has got to be another moment where they just did some editing. Like there was gonna be an extended scene of them sneaking up or something, but like nope, we only got 21 minutes. Because yeah, that's a weird piece to like fully animate and then like take back. You know?
Yeah. So a battle breaks out, and Prime tells Megatron that he's lost, but Megatron insists he's only begun to triumph. He transforms and he lands in Soundwave's hand, which is a beautiful bit of animation.
Yeah, it's really
thankfully
nice
because we're going to see it a couple times in this episode. And then Soundwave shoots the cage that the humans are trapped in. And the humans flee, and Prime orders the Autobots not to fire, saying they can't endanger the humans.
Well, as soon as the humans are out of the cage, they sort of like do this little dance in front of Prime, going like, "Oh my gosh, we're caught in the middle. Where do we go?" You know, they at least, again, it's not animated beautifully. Well, it's nice looking. It's a great shot, but like their movement is really like jumpy and low frame rate. So like they actually had to like put in the dialogue of them saying like, "Which way do we go? We're caught in the middle." You know,
Right,
and then Optimus says. And I like how he has to say the full sentence. Like, at this point, Optimus, we know. You like the people. You know, you're not going to hurt them. Even if you did make fun of their primitive technology last episode, which wasn't cool, and I'm not forgetting it. You're not completely off the hook with me, Optimus.
Jersey's going to come out of this series actually disliking the Autobots by the end of it.
I'm just going to like do like Louis Anderson's mom. I'm just going to click my tongue at them every once in a while, you know, and I don't like that. You should know better, Optimus. But like, it's like, we can't endanger the humans. It's like, it just feels like, okay, yeah, we know now, but it's good that you say that to remind us all of your core values. And Megatron says, "Oh, you disappoint me. I always put humans in your way, and it always slows you down." So what does he do?
Well, he then weirdly reaches behind his back and pulls out a small handheld gun, and he fires at large clumps of rock that are around the Autobots, because, you know, in this series there's always boulders just on the ground.
Yep.
And thankfully, Ironhide tells us,
Megatron, energize those boulders!
Thankfully, he told us that, because otherwise we'd have no clue what's going on here.
This
The
is
boulders
weird.
all fly towards various Autobots and knock them off their feet. So what is this gun, and what can it do?
And why didn't you say what it is? Like, this goes back to, it's like, you know, you and I have both sort of been leading up to this whole, like, yeah, in season 2, there's a lot of them just like standing across the desert and shooting at each other kind of fights. And we don't get as much imaginative fighting. So cool. We get like this crazy weapon that Megatron has that makes boulders fly around like rock lords, right? I mean, maybe, you know, in the past, Larry Parr heard you when you almost defected from Transformers fandom to become a Rock Lords fan. He was like, I suspect in the future somebody's going to want this, so I'm going to make this gun that can make rocks sentient. And then, you know, once again, I got left on the cutting room floor. Like, we can't explore that fully in 21 minutes. Just have him make the rocks come alive and bounce on people, and that'll just be the end of it.
Powerful living rocks!
Yeah, they are powerful living rocks. And by the way, this episode is very boulder-centric. There's a lot of boulders in this one, because this isn't the only scene where boulders have a lot to do.
It's the whole series, man, especially this season, where it's like they're in a firefight and there's convenient boulders to hide behind.
That's true. I lived in the desert for a while. Not a lot of boulders where I was. I mean, you came to visit me there, right? It's like, did we see like just giant, like 30-foot tall boulders everywhere we went? No.
And it seemed to be a lot flatter than the cartoon gave me.
I mean, I've been to the Grand Canyon and I've been to Death Valley. Well, now that I think about it, Death Valley, there's a lot of big rock formations there that's jutting out of the ground. So maybe there's someplace around there. I don't know where they are right now, but there's a lot of boulders to be found. And actually, later on in the episode, they're in Central Africa, and there's boulders all over the place. So my pet theory is that this was actually a way to like sideline insert the Rock Lords idea into the Transformers to please future Hoover, but they just didn't. They ran out of time and couldn't fully do it. But so why is he making rocks like bounce around and hit everybody all over the place?
Well, Megatron wants all the Autobots squished, so he transforms again into gun mode and lands in Soundwave's hand. Same animation as we saw before. And he tells the Decepticons to bring me the Autobot gears as he lands back in Soundwave's hand.
Mm. How do you feel about Megatron talking when he's in gun mode? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's fine. I don't have any problem with it.
Oh, I wasn't asking like, I wasn't going like pro or con. It's just like, it doesn't happen a lot. Like it happened in Autobot Spike, right? And like, I think in Fire on the Mountain, he like says finish him Soundwave when he's in gun mode, but he doesn't do a lot of talking in gun mode. So anyway, it's just interesting. Because another thing is like most of the other Transformers, when they talk, like you go inside the Autobot's dashboard, you see lights lighting up indicating they're talking right now. You know? Megatron doesn't have that, so it's just like his voice is just there while there's this inanimate thing, right? Anyway, but yeah, bring me the Autobot gears, and then what do they do?
So the Decepticons shoot all around Gears' feet, and they open up a crevice because the ground in Transformers cartoons is always made of Kleenex and fruit roll-ups. Just tear right through it. Do anything, it tears a crack in the ground.
Yeah, basically, yes.
So Gears falls into that hole, and we see him looking up at the top of the hole where Megatron and Starscream look down at him.
Very reminiscent of War of the Dinobots.
Prepare to withdraw.
Just as soon as I melt Gears into a pool of base metal.
Forward! That Autobot is the key to my plan. A plan which will bring us final victory.
And yes, Megatron just smacked Starscream for the second time in literally 5 minutes. Same animation and all. So this is shaping up to be a great episode.
There's a new joke going around. Have you heard it? What is the 5 fingers say to the face? What? Slap!
Poor Starscream. I mean, he really is. I've come to the conclusion that he's like the ultimate POS. But the fact that like in less than 5 minutes, this has been his day so far. It's like, all right, I'm going to be a bad guy. How do you be a bad guy? I'm going to go kill that guy. No, don't hit him. He hits him in the face, right? All right. Well, there's an Autobot. He's not a human, so you know I'm gonna kill that guy. No, can't I do anything right?
The funny thing is that in this episode, Starscream does not once backtalk Megatron. He's on his best behavior. He calls him Mighty Megatron when he shows up.
That's right.
He's not once taking an issue with his plan, and yet he gets beat twice.
Well, okay, so are we still dealing with fallout from Countdown to Extinction? Because, like, after that, we got, like, an episode without Starscream, right? And so, like, maybe it's like their relationship is still healing.
That's true, because he wasn't in A Plague of Insecticons at all.
At all.
So, yeah, I guess this is Starscream fresh out of timeout. He's on his best behavior.
That's right.
And he's still getting beat.
Because Megatron's still mad at him. He almost killed everybody. And Megatron's like, where's Dr. Arkeville? About that. And besides, you fired him, Megatron. Anyway. So, he smacks Starscream again. And he's like, well, this is part of my plan too. And what's his plan?
Well, Skywarp lifts Gears out of the hole. And he takes off with him, essentially strapped to the bottom of his jet mode. The rest of Megatron's bunch fly off, as Prime notes.
They've got Gears.
Okay, now what did you think of the delivery here when Prime says they've got Gears?
Well, it's okay. So I did think about this because it's such an efficient little line of dialogue. It's just a note. It's basically to say to the audience, yes, the Autobots know that Gears is abducted, right? And like we're showing Optimus see them, right? Instead of having to do a whole like you did everything you could, Prime. I don't know, maybe where's Mirage? You know, because that's like 4 lines of dialogue, right? Rather, this is one. They got Gears. Well, how do you read it?
Well, I think it could go a few different ways. Concern, of course, is one. You know, Prime being concerned for his troops. But maybe a bit of gladness, too, like, they've got Gears. Well, I was hoping they would have gotten Hound, too, but at least they got Gears.
Count your blessings. Yeah. Every day's a new day.
What's maybe that sound? Oh, it's not Gears complaining for once. Thank God.
Oh, I like this image you're painting of him being like an impatient and disheveled parent. Who's like, kids, will you please go outside? Just leave Dad alone with his stories. By the way, I want the record to show that I read that as concern. He's like, they got Gears. Oh no. So, okay.
We change scenes to somewhere else. where Megatron points out to anyone listening his creation, the Solar Needle.
Yeah.
And it is a giant tower surrounded by 12 spherical little globes in a deforested circular area that is surrounded by trees. And he remarks to Gears, whom he has caged up in some kind of electrified cage.
And you, Autobot, you will help me pierce the fiery heart of the sun to harness its power.
Ah, go ding your diodes and get defunct, Megatron. I'm not helping you do zilch.
Starscream, perhaps your null ray will make our guest more cooperative. A secret sensor scan of all the Autobots revealed that you alone have the special circuit I need.
What happened? I suddenly feel so good-natured.
Oh, obviously this circuit modulated your personality. But that can wait. Now watch and marvel as I harness the mighty power of the sun.
So a couple things here. Megatron says, Starscream, use your null ray instead of his usual activate the null ray.
The null ray. Yeah, the communal null ray. So suddenly Megatron starts getting into property rights.
So is this the tickle Starscream gets after 2 slaps in this abusive relationship?
I guess so.
Is it maybe considered empowering to Starscream to finally have it addressed as his null ray? One can only speculate as to what Starscream gets out of this relationship. What are the pros that outweigh the cons of getting smacked 2 times in 5 minutes? I don't know.
Being one heartbeat away from leading the Decepticons, right?
I guess so.
I mean, he's pretty much made that clear in a lot of episodes that's all he cares about. I'm Starscream, tyrant of the firmament. but yeah, it is. You can't help but notice it after so many episodes of Starscream activate the null ray, activate your null ray, and when he zaps Gears like freezes in place, which actually goes to what the file card suggests the null ray actually does do.
Whereas usually it's just used like another gun, like, oh, I'm shooting things.
Yeah, like he says, like, my null ray will stop your squirming for a while, and then he shoots at them, but they don't like get paralyzed in past episodes. This one, like, it clearly shows what it's supposed to be doing. And it going back to like the very first episode where he would like fire at generators and like with his null ray, and then you hear them stop. So why freeze him?
Well, secondly, Megatron needed a special circuit only present in Gears. He says he scanned all the Autobots, and only one of them had it. So the null ray blast froze Gears, and Megatron opened his chassis, removing a small disc-shaped circuit from him. Why did only Gears have it? I'm guessing it's an older type, probably outdated and dangerous, like 1950s flammable pajamas or 1970s rocket-firing Battlestar Galactica toys. Since Gears is portrayed as an old grump, that sort of makes sense. Probably all the newer circuits have thresholds that wouldn't allow as much energy to pass through due to safety concerns. So let's hear it for old technology. The same reason I still run Photoshop 6 on this computer.
Oh, so old. Like, I bet it smells like burning electrical things when you use your computer, doesn't it? like when you use like a 1950s record player, that smell that you get of like, oh, this is like badly insulated wiring. No, but I thought about this too. Like when Megatron says like, okay, this is something only you have. This is a circuit that I need for my thing that only you have. And I was like, well, in humans, like our physiology is very, very uniform. Like it's the same across most of us, right? There's subtle variation, but 2 lungs, stomach, heart, liver, kidneys, pancreas, etc., right? Like very few of us, to my reckoning, have like an organ that none of the rest of us have, right? And I was thinking like, okay, well, why should Transformers be like perfectly analogous to humans, Because they are creatures that can change. They have 2 sort of like main forms, which is something we certainly do not. And yes, you think about technology and it's like, if you have like an Apple laptop for more than 5 years, it might as well been, from the time of the pharaohs, so technology, at least in our lifetimes, has progressed really fast. So why wouldn't like a quote unquote older Transformer have completely different physiology than other Transformers?
Yeah, it's more analogous to cars. Like, you can mention to someone what kind of an engine you have in your car, and they'll be like, oh, that one. parts can become sort of, I wouldn't say like legendary, but it's like
legendary.
they have different aspects.
Yeah, well, the last car I had before I had my current car had a tape deck in it. And I remember giving a student a ride home from class. Their parents gave me permission. I had a whole thing to deal with the parents. Don't anybody get weird about it. But this kid was, I think, 9 at the time. They were like, oh, I want to unroll the window. I'm like, oh, it's right there. And I pointed to the hand crank. And they're like, where am I looking? And they're like patting the wall looking for a button. I'm like, it's the crank right there. And I showed them and I unrolled it. And they're like, they turned to me like, how old is this car?
Like, what's a crank?
You have to crank it? Like, what are you, for the Middle Ages? When you get sick, do you bleed yourself?
I think I saw this device on Game of Thrones.
So it caught me off guard when I encountered the idea. But then as I backed away from it, I was like, actually, why wouldn't they have different physiologies between one another? And that just makes me think like, wow, Ratchet might be one of the greatest heroes of Cybertron then, because how much stuff is in that guy's head if he's able to fix all his guys? Or is he always going to, the Cybertron version of YouTube process videos?
How do I do this?
How to replace a Cosmotron. First, make sure all your tools are in good shape and lined up in a row. Keep them in proper order and keep them clean. And Ratchet's like, come on, just help me get to the part where I fix it.
And then an Autobot walks in. Hey, what are you watching? Oh, nothing.
What's up, Cybertron? Don't forget to smash that button. Anyway.
So anyway, a side effect of this circuit was apparently interfering with Gears' personality. And this is very ahead of its time, because this was in 1985, before everyone and their mother were on mood stabilizers.
This was at the beginning of that, right? Like Ritalin and stuff. But yeah.
So we have a character whose mood is interfered with due to an archaic circuit. There was something in Gears' body not allowing his body to produce roboserotonin.
Oh.
And now that said thing is removed, Gears can experience happiness at last. So that's something.
Wow.
So right away, Grumpy Gears is happy. All that roboserotonin is finally getting to where it needs to go.
He literally says, what happened? I suddenly feel so good-natured.
Yep.
Can we also talk about Megatron's reaction to when Gears says he's good-natured? These are all fabulous actors, all of these people who play these Transformers, but this line is I feel like one of the great performances of Megatron as a character. And when Gears like, I feel so good, and Megatron's like, ugh.
It's like, it wasn't factoring this into the plan, but whatever.
It's like, oh, I thought he was going to be docile. I didn't know he's going to turn into Ned Flanders on me. Ugh. But you can hear the eye roll in his groan.
Right, totally.
Obviously this circuit modulated your personality.
So he puts the circuit in the Solar Needle, and what happens?
Well, the device lights up and instantly fires a ray towards the sun. And the ray seems to hit the sun and bounce back, reabsorbing into the Solar Needle. Now, of course, the sun is 93 million miles away.
93 miles times a million more. Quite a trip we've planned.
So I'm just going to leave it to you to figure out how this device works.
The sun is far away.
About 93 million miles away. And that's why it looks so small.
It would be a 16-minute round trip, right? So they just sped things up a little bit. They Keystone copped it just for our benefit. But it is not inconceivable. And I remember as a child learning that, because they talk about solar flares in a minute. I remember learning that like the sun is emitting stuff that is like can hit us, like it can like emit like plasma and other radiation that can hit us. And I remember being like freaked out by it. It's like like it's so far away. How can it shoot something that can get us? And my 5th grade teacher, who was like a super awesome science teacher, he had a piranha in the classroom. He's like, the sun's light is getting here. I'm like, oh. Yeah, that's right. Heat is a form of radiation, so some of the stuff is beneficial.
The sun is a mass of incandescent gas, a gigantic nuclear furnace. where hydrogen is built into helium at a temperature of millions of degrees.
It's a weird device, but it's not a completely implausible device.
Well, the needle shoots out energy to the 12 spheres that surround it, and Megatron celebrates. Mm-hmm. We cut to Pisa. I'm not even kidding. We cut to Pisa because it's identified by the famous Leaning Tower, and we see an earthquake starting. Mm-hmm. We cut to Paris, identified by the Eiffel Tower. Basically, we're cutting to places that are instantly visually recognizable.
As not here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Earth starts to shake there, too. Cut to the U.S. of A.
Identified by Sergeant Slaughter.
Statue of Liberty. That would have been great.
Jump, Yardbird! You're going to war till you wish you were dead. And then keep going, because you're afraid if you don't, I won't let you die.
It was just Sergeant Slaughter just punching cobras, like a row of cobras, and then the Earth starts shaking. Oh, now we're in Washington, D.C.
But Jersey didn't write this episode, so instead we cut to the Statue of Liberty, and we see the same thing happen. So this thing Megatron's made is affecting the entire planet again. Cut back to the Ark, where we're also experiencing earthquakes. Prime is telling everyone that rescuing Gears is their first priority as they rush outside to determine what's going on. So Bumblebee sees the sun. It looks like it's on overload. It's just like pulsating and looks very scary. And he points out that solar flares are occurring. The earthquake lets loose some falling boulders because there's always boulders around, and they fall down around the front of HQ, and Bluestreak and Cliffjumper barely avoid getting squished. And Prime has a thought.
Megatron is behind this. I'd bet my titanium torsion bars on it.
Torsion bar.
Yet another good old Autobot alliteration.
And I mean, well, a torsion bar is a part on a vehicle. You know, has to do with like suspension of cars. So he's betting his Achilles tendon on it.
Very robot-y sounding.
Yep.
So cutting back to Megatron and his bunch, we see his solar needle totally sucking down a crazy amount of power from the sun, and Megatron is in full celebration mode, saying nothing can stand against him.
By the way, I do like that Megatron's full celebration mode is just like fists in the air and like he's just like raising the roof. That's how Megatron celebrates.
He's like got a really action pose and he's like flexing his arms.
He's not dancing. He doesn't do a jig. He doesn't caper. He just like puts his legs shoulder width apart, both fists up in the air, and just sort of rocks his arms up and down. Because it's like a lot of episodes where he does this.
So meanwhile, Starscream orders Autobot slave Gears to start filling the empty Energon cubes up via the solar needle. And Gears, drowning in robo-serotonin, is only too happy to help. He says,
Always happy to oblige, but I'm not sure why.
Yeah, so this seems like a brutally inefficient way to harness all of this energy that they're sucking out of the sun is that
Totally.
Gears is slowly picking up little Energon cubes, and he walks to a wall, and there's like a slot that he like sticks the Energon cube in, and then he pulls it out and it's full, right?
For such a huge device and how much energy it's throwing around, there's just like that almost like a little dumbwaiter where they're putting in Energon cubes and it's full now. It's like this is not very efficient.
Either the cubes are like super concentrated, like they're like super cubes, or it's just like Megatron's like lowered the bar so much. He's like, look, just give me 5 cubes. I don't care. Just give me something, you know? Like in the first episode of season 1, they would have like 40 or 50 Energon cubes and they'd smush them into those Energon plates and fly away with them.
Yeah.
Now Gears is just like trundling along with this one box, you know? And it's like, that's productive, Starscream. Way to go. You're a good manager.
That's another thing about this episode. Reflector's not there. Frenzy and Rumble don't come out to help at all.
Oh, wow.
So it's like they're really just the Seekers and Soundwave there to do anything. So kind of odd. But Megatron knows that Prime will find him soon enough, and he states that he'll have a surprise ready for him when he arrives.
A shocking surprise. And like at this point, Starscream should really lean in and be like, careful. It's perilously close to dad jokes.
Leave those to kick back.
Yeah, and Thundercracker, like Thundercracker did, like, oh, Megatron wanted to give you a warm welcome, and then he shoots fire at them, It's like, that's fine for Thundercracker. Listen to his voice. He's clearly like 65 years old. Megatron, come on, you're dynamic. You're in your prime, But anyway, we cut back to the Ark.
And Prime has just gotten the gist from Teletran 1.
Teletran 1 has confirmed my fears. Someone has tapped into the heart of the sun, creating a dangerous instability. Unless this process can be stopped, the sun will explode in slightly less than 2 Earth hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'd play a Thomas Dolby sample here, but Science Guy has put a gun to his head and decided he just can't with this.
The sun will explode in slightly less than 2 Earth hours. Well, if he's destabilized it, the sun is like a continuous explosion that's being held by its own gravity.
A gigantic nuclear furnace.
And so it's not unreasonable that if you tampered with the balance between those two forces, it would either implode or explode, right?
I guess. So let's press on. Prime says he's pinpointed Megatron's location to the, quote, geographic center of Africa.
It's like we couldn't look up what country to pick. It's like it's a continent, but you don't want to go through the trouble of picking an actual country to put in. Okay, geographic center of Africa, fine. Although, to be fair, there's another episode coming up where they basically say San Francisco. Teletran 1 gives the location, and Optimus says, oh, that's San Francisco, right? So anyway, so yeah, he's like, okay, go ahead and roll out.
Yep. Prime gives the order to transform and roll out. Hopefully rendezvousing with Skyfire somewhere so he can fly them there, because I really don't want to think about the Autobots driving to Africa in less than 2 hours.
Less than 2 Earth hours.
Even with crazy wheeljack water skis. I don't want to think about that. Boy, where's that RID Car Robot Space Bridge technology when they need it, huh?
Anybody who hasn't watched the 2001 RID series, they introduced a really cool idea for the space bridge in there. I highly recommend it.
Get ready to enter Global Space Bridge warp bubble in 7 seconds.
Gotcha.
Anyway, but yeah, it's like, well, how fast does Skyfire fly too? Even if it takes Skyfire less than 2 hours, huh? Okay, it's like Transformers episodes also like tend to lean on a ticking clock a lot.
Mm-hmm. But don't pull at the fabric at the end of the sweater.
Right.
Skyfire gets them there at the nick of time. Sure. Nod your head. We're moving on.
Well, I mean, I don't need to go into my kid logic rant again, do I? Right? It's like this is the way kids play. They transform. They go to Africa. How much time do they have? Less than 2 Earth hours, or 65 billion astroseconds, whichever comes first.
So the Autobots drive off, and we see the sun just radiate with power, looking like it's just going to melt the Earth as we head to our first commercial break.
Pretty sweet animation here as you look up at the sun, right? Like with all those flares coming around.
Very animated.
Yeah, it's really, really cool looking. It's a really neat. It's a nice cliffhanger to end on, and it's a little bit more abstract, right? It's not like a character pointing a gun at the camera saying you must be destroyed. Yeah. It's like, here's the sun almost ready to explode. How almost ready it is? There are flames coming at you at the camera. It's intense looking, right? And so gosh, after that haunting image hits your brain, how are you going to focus on anything else?
Well, this sun is so hot, but thankfully we're treated to a commercial for Jell-O Pudding Pops, which will certainly cool us off and not have us think about the actor starring in the commercial at all.
I'm looking away.
Jell-O Pudding Pops! Jell-O Pudding Pops! Frozen pudding on a stick!
Moving on, and we keep up the crazy science with a commercial for the Mad Scientist Monster Lab. Too gross.
Too gross.
First, you put monster flesh on their creepy little bones. Then pour flesh remover into the monster lab and bubble off their flab.
Too yucky.
Too yucky.
And how about some wonderful refreshment to quench our thirst under this hot sun? How about some sugar-free Dr. Pepper?
Sugar-free Dr. Pepper. Sugar-free Dr. Pepper.
Because the sun open your eyes.
Makes me want to dance.
And yes, kids, it used to be called sugar-free Dr. Pepper before it was called Diet Dr. Pepper.
So, okay, you filled us up with all this sugar.
Yeah,
and
we got chocolate, we got soda, we got gross stuff. Let's get back to our episode.
Wow, we really did. Like, we consumed so much sugar back then. Like, so much. And, like, even some of that mad scientist stuff was actually, like, stuff you could eat. Like, you could eat, like, the monster's brains. And it was like, oh, it's yummy. It tastes like fruit. Oh, my gosh. Okay, yeah. So now that we're all amped up and we're shaking in our chairs, what happens next?
We open on the Solar Needle, still buzzing with power as Megatron, Starscream, and Gears look on. We see Thundercracker and Skywarp filling Energon cubes as an earthquake breaks out. And Starscream asks Megatron why the Earth seems unstable. But Megatron's just like, The Autobots are due here anytime, so just worry about that instead.
Okay, we have been here before. Shame on all of you Decepticons, because you guys are just like in full denial mode when the Earth shakes when Megatron's doing a super thing and Starscream says, gosh, that's weird. The next thing that happens is Optimus is going to have to save you all. So, bail out now. But nope, they're still there. Okay.
Yeah, but Starscream's still on his best behavior, so he's not saying anything.
Yeah. Yeah, again, the only thing you can point to, and maybe this is why another reason this episode, it makes sense to put it earlier on in the watching order, because like you said, Starscream's still in, like, he's in post timeout mode, where he's like, you like me again, Dad? You like me?
Well, we cut to a zebra stampede, not something we see very often. As we see the Autobots driving through the African plains, we're going to keep my sanity as much as we can, and I'm going to assume they were just freshly dropped off by Skyfire. Skyfire and Prowl had somewhere to go, so they left. They had to quickly drop the Autobots off. They couldn't take them all the way to the Solar Needle, or else the Decepticons would see. So they had to stay a little far back from it so the Autobots could drive the rest of the way. That's official canon right now.
And once again, it's like, it's clearly demonstrating that they're just writing the way kids play. Because, like, well, we just drove to Africa, that's all. Because, like, why in the world would Skyfire be like, okay, I could take you all the way except for, like, the last 5 miles? Why?
They don't want to get seen by the Decepticons.
I told Omega Supreme I'd help him move, and I got to be back by 3 o'clock. Right? Like, why? Yeah, why? They don't want to be seen. Come on. But anyway, so yes, instead of flying in at, say, 700 miles an hour, they drive up at 65 miles an hour.
Unfortunately, they stumble upon this area thick with brush and jungle. Mm-hmm. So they instantly decide to laser themselves a road. As Sunstreaker and Jazz literally hop on the front of Prime's truck mode, basically hanging off the sides. And they instantly annihilate any plants in their path. Yeah. Just shooting them, and they just basically vaporize.
Yeah.
So what would Skytree have to say about this?
Yeah, what would Skytree have to say about this, right? I mean, there's a line in a He-Man episode where he tells Skeletor, I don't like people who hurt trees. So He-Man would certainly be clicking his tongue at this. Also, may I note, there are no humans around in this episode.
No.
We've seen a few humans at the top. We saw the prospectors. We're going, yeehaw, we're rich, but...
It's probably a good thing, because they've told us we're in the geographic center of Africa. And the way 80s cartoons portrayed any non-American people were... not kind at best, let's say.
How come Snake Eyes is getting all the brains and you are getting all the ugly, right? Yeah.
So I'm not sure we wanted to see what their take on 1980s Africans would have been.
I suppose you're right. I guess they gave us a gift, but I'm trying to rationalize in my head. So your brain breaks on, like, how'd they get to Africa? My brain breaks on, like, how can creatures who are from an advanced civilization, who have a nuanced view of what life can be, right? They're looking at these squishy little flesh creatures. They're like, hey, your life, we're going to protect you. We can't endanger the humans. Oh, that tree? Well, we can just
in our way. Burn it.
It's in our way, burn it, right? I know I might be splitting hairs with some people, but also, I mean, like for further context, like I'm a vegetarian, right? And yeah, so I'm eating plants and things like that. But it's like this whole idea of like nothing with a central nervous system, right? If I can avoid it at all costs, right? And part of that comes out of like a sense of compassion that I learned from characters like Optimus, and now he's got guys sitting on his side that are mowing down an entire forest. Let's even step aside and say like, okay, it's just trees. Fine. There's probably life in those trees, other kinds of life. There might be all sorts of creatures in those woods that you're just mowing down. This is so 1980s USA, manliness makes a path. And if you're in the way of that path, sorry, Rowdy Piper's got to make you put on the glasses. It's I have to say, like, as a child, I didn't think a thing about it. It's like, that's just what men do. But as an adult now, and especially as an adult who has like a mixed bag relationship with the whole concept of violence in action cartoons and with like ethical treatment of living things, it's just like, that makes me feel weird. It really makes me uncomfortable.
So let's look away from the Autobots journey.
Thank you.
And we cut back to Megatron and his bunch, where Gears is happily working away at gathering Energon cubes, not understanding why he can't get upset about his actions. That robo-serotonin is a-flowing with no signs of stopping. Starscream is slighted by Gears calling Megatron an evil son of a retro rat, and he fires in his direction, but with cliffjumper-like aim, hits one of the spheres around the Solar Needle instead of Gears. And Megatron swats his arm down too late as the shot ricochets back at their feet, causing them both, as well as Gears, to go flying. We see Gears catapult into Soundwave as an Energon cube flies into the circle of energy made by the spheres, which sends a lightning bolt of power towards Starscream. And Megatron, of course, yells at him for almost destroying the Solar Needle, but unfortunately he doesn't hit him again.
Unfortunately. Come for the rampant destruction of defenseless life and the essential familial abuse. The Transformers. It's for kids.
Well, Starscream takes his problems out on Gears and tells him to work faster. And Gears retorts,
Hey, no problem, Starscream. I love being a slave. Or do I?
So here we see Gears beginning to question his happiness, starting to realize he shouldn't be happy doing this. So something is wrong. And so yes, I looked it up. You can have too much serotonin in your body, which will turn your happiness right back to sadness as you deal with an elevated heart rate, fever, goosebumps, and even worse.
Ooh.
So stay out of your mom's Prozac, kids. Doc from G.I. Joe is just going to be watching you through the bathroom window anyway.
That's a prescription for danger. Doc! Never take medicine without a grown-up present. You could do more harm than good.
Well, you had to go there. You also notice that, let's back up 2 steps. Starscream, this whole event starts up because Starscream gets mad because Gears cheerfully calls Megatron, what does he call him?
Son of a retro rat.
Son of a retro rat. Oh man, I feel weird just saying it. I'm sure that on Cybertron, I just said like a filthy, filthy curse. But Starscream gets mad on Megatron's behalf. Right.
Yeah.
So again, further evidence that this is him trying to like kiss up to the boss.
Best behavior
Starscream. That could be a variant they make for the Masterpiece line where he has like an especially cloying face. But yeah, like something's happening where he's like, yours is noticing that this isn't right.
Yeah. He still thinks Megatron's bad news. He calls him a son of a retro rat, but he does it cheerfully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And okay, so another thing I like about this goes back to something we talked about last time about how these shows, if they start to age them down, what is that age group dealing with? Well, a lot of stories for like 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds is about like managing your feelings. You are not your feelings. Your feelings are things that happen to you and it's a signal in the world, but it's not the sum of you. And here's a story about a guy whose mood changes drastically, but it doesn't change who he is. Who is he? He's an Autobot. Right? He still knows the Decepticons are bad people and he shouldn't be helping them. But for some reason, he just can't get upset and he's puzzling it out. Right? And he's separating himself from the feeling in this moment. Right? I love being a slave, or do I? Right? Well, that's the feeling I have right now, but something's telling me that that's not the full story here. Right?
Yeah.
So again, like these people were doing their level best to write stuff for an audience. So we don't have to go into it in great detail, whoever, but I just think like every so often we should say, If you show up and say it doesn't hold up, I would respond with, hold up to what? And secondly is like, you can't take literature or stories that were written for a certain age group and say, well, it doesn't work for when you're 55. Well, it probably shouldn't. It really shouldn't at that time. You're a very different person at 55 than you are at 5. At least I hope you are, right? So we cut back to Prime, and he's still killing trees, huh?
Cutting back to Prime and his tree annihilation brigade.
It's just like Optimus is just like punching a tree in the stomach and just laughing as he does it. Bumblebee's tearing dandelions out of the ground. If only Chip were here.
Well, we see Prime has been watching far too many Dukes of Hazzard episodes because he tries to jump a canyon, this little opening in the ground, because, as we discussed before, all the ground is made out of Kleenex and fruit roll-up, so there's always holes in the ground and canyons to jump over. So Prime is going to jump this canyon in the ground, complete with his trailer, and somehow he does it. Which makes me glad the science guy is not here to see this.
This is something that a lot of these cartoons and even TV shows in this time period did, whereas like all you have to do is when you get to the edge of the cliff, you just push your nose up and you'll go up in an arc over the
Yeah, you don't need a ramp or anything. You just
like jerk back.
Lift up.
Like when you're on a BMX bike and you want to do like a little bunny hop, you just like lift up the front wheel. It's the same idea. But like when I was a kid, I thought that's like really how it worked. Like, oh, but sure, if you go to a chasm, you just like lean back in your chair and the car will just go up.
It checks out. So not only does Prime successfully make this jump, well, if Prime can do it with a huge trailer, surely all the Autobots can do it. And 2 by 2, all the Autobots make the same jump. But then little Bumblebee, bringing up the rear here, he comes just a little bit short, and he begins to fall backwards, but Wheeljack notices, transforms to robot mode, comes back to catch him as Bumblebee's flooring it to try to get traction in his front wheels to pull him up from the cliff there. So Wheeljack manages to catch him just as he begins to fall, and they do all this wordlessly. Bumblebee never yells for help. Wheeljack never says, I'm coming to save you, buddy.
Thank you.
Just get it done and move along. Which is weird because it's not like this was their only line in the episode or anything. They have other lines, so you would think that would be in the script for them to talk.
Yeah, well, especially we've already pointed out there's some scenes where the animation isn't up to the task at hand, and so they have the characters say lines, like the miners being like, we're caught in the middle. Yep. You know, it's like here's a scene where it's like, well, it's clear what's happening, but like a little bit of like a, thanks, Wheeljack. No problem, little buddy. I mean, it's not like awesome dialogue, but you know, it tells us that there's some warmth here. But this also feels like, again, like that commando scene in the beginning. Is that what they're after with this? Is like, well, this is a scene really about just showing how they're action characters on the move. I don't know, but it does stick out, doesn't it?
Definitely. So at last, the Autobots arrive at the Solar Needle and decide that violence is definitely the answer. So they all begin shooting at it. Only they find their blast reflected right back at them.
Yeah.
And Megatron and Starscream have a good laugh. Turns out that was the surprise that Megatron had for them. It was a little force shield.
Yeah. He enjoyed my force shield surprise.
So Prime concocts a plan to get past the energy shield, thinking that the energy can be blocked at its entry point. So Prime decides to block it with his own body, but Ironhide protests, saying he should do it as Prime's too important. And while they're arguing about it, Cliffjumper takes off and Duke Boys his way up to the needle by just lifting the front of his car himself.
I also like the idea of like turning Duke Boys into a verb. Let's go ahead and Duke Boys this, everybody.
It's done quite often in this episode, so.
And they kind of like try to set this up as like a dramatic thing, like Cliffjumper's doing the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah. So Cliffjumper shoots up and basically hits the electricity where it's coming into the Solar Needle, and he disrupts the energy flow.
And it just gets like sort of like zapped out of the scene, right? He's like, boom, he just flies out of there.
Yeah. I totally expected him to miss and just land in the jungle.
Oh, here we go.
And he does land in the jungle, but only after the energy zaps him off course. Successfully opening up the energy shield, the Autobots rush in and are soon joined by a dazed Cliffjumper, which is weird because they go to the trouble of showing Cliffjumper like wake up in the forest or whatever you would call that area.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, what even happened? And so it's like they go to this great lengths to give him a scene of recovering, and then he just runs back to the team. It's like, why did you do that?
Yeah, and I mean, it's again, this feels like we're in this new period where the show is beginning to be aged down, where it's like, well, we can't show him. We can suggest that there's danger and he could be hurt, but we can't actually show the harm. Right? Go back 5 or 6 episodes, and we've got like scenes of the Autobots transforming into vehicle mode, and their windshields are shattered. The hood of their car is all smashed to bits, you know. But this is like he's basically fine. He's just like laying on the ground, and he's like a little dazed, right? Which, like, as a child, I mean, I don't want to like go into the whole like these shows warped my mind as a child, but like I did have this sense that, well, if you just get hit on the head hard enough, you just faint, and then when you wake up, you're like, whoa, what happened? And you're fine, you know, because like that's always what happens in these. And I feel like if it were a season 1 episode, he would have looked burnt, and Ratchet would be retrieving him. It'd be more like, oh, you know, he's unconscious, but I'll get him back to base and I'll fix him, right? A suggestion of recovery, but we wouldn't just have him like get right back up and be like, well, that was weird. I almost gave my life to save the Autobot cause and then didn't die. You know, brushes off his arms, then runs into the fight.
So the Autobots enter the area of the Solar Needle and basically find it deserted until Gears runs around the corner, knocking Ratchet over in an attempt to retrieve his circuit from the Solar Needle. But Skywarp then shows up and stops him. Or Starscream, maybe, because it was Starscream's colors and Skywarp's voice.
It was Starscream doing an impersonation of Skywarp. He's like, now's my chance to try out my backup plan in case this leadership of the Decepticons doesn't turn out. I'm going to be the Rich Little of Cybertron.
We cut away to Bumblebee seeing Gears' plight, who heads towards them. But now Starscream is standing over Gears, about to blow him away regardless of what Megatron says. And Gears cheerily tells Starscream to look behind him, and Starscream retorts,
Do you seriously expect me to fall for such a stupid trick?
And that sound you heard there was Bumblebee Duke Boysing himself into Starscream's back, knocking him off Gears.
Oh, Bumblebee, you're so good. He rammed into Starscream, the second most powerful Decepticon, right? Like, imagine walking into a room and there's the second most powerful anybody in that room, and you're gonna jump into their back? I don't think so. Not me. Bumblebee does, though.
Soundwave launches Laserbeak, who attacks Bumblebee, who spins out and flips over on his roof. And then Ravage is ejected, who bounces on the transforming Bumblebee. And I'll let Jersey beam with pride over what Bumblebee does here.
There is nothing better than cute little characters being super brave and taking out bullies. Because he doesn't just... Because remember, Bumblebee's taken on Ravage before, Fire on the Mountain, right? And it was a tense fight. Ravage was overpowering him. Ravage, little tiny kitty cat, lives inside Soundwave's chest, overpowering Bumblebee. Not very strong, but what does he do in this instance? He takes Ravage out, and not just Ravage.
He kicks Ravage into Soundwave.
He takes out the big freaky weirdo of the Decepticon army. That's right. That's how great Bumblebee is. That's why he's the best.
Well, Bumblebee then makes it over to Gears, who thanks him for the assist and remarks how fun the fight is.
That is a great line. I love this line ever since I was a child. I was like, hey, isn't this a fun fight? There was this TV show. I forget what it was. It was ages ago, and it had Alec Baldwin. He's playing like a guy that this woman's dating, and he's like one of a series of boyfriends, and like he's like so intensely positive about everything that like he's driving her crazy. And at one point, they're like, she starts yelling at him. She's like losing her temper with him, and she kicks him out of the apartment. And then just as he's leaving, he pokes his head back at the door. He's like, "Isn't this a great fight?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." They stole that line from Transformers. But
speaking of fights, Prime and Megatron are grappling as Prime warns him that they have to turn off the Solar Needle before the sun self-destructs. But Megatron declares it fake news as he lifts up Prime above his head and tosses Prime towards the crackling energy of the spheres, towards certain doom. It's going to be like when Jersey walked into the electric fence here. See episode 15.
Editor's note, asterisk. Yeah, it's probably going to feel a lot like that or worse. That's what I'm thinking about as Optimus flies towards this crackling energy that almost killed Starscream and Megatron earlier in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
So
during our second commercial break, I want to stay as far away from electricity as possible. So how about some nice rubber muscle figures? No chance of getting electrified if there's rubber in your hand.
That's very true. The rubber muscle things, don't quote us on this, but we're pretty sure they will defend you against electricity.
So if you're going to get potentially struck by lightning, make sure you have some muscle figures in your hand and you'll be fine. And you know what else probably doesn't conduct electricity is Play-Doh. So let's play with the Play-Doh Fun Factory. I'm going to push the Play-Doh in and have it come out holes like spaghetti.
The snake is after your spaghetti. I want your spaghetti.
And because the sun could burn out at any moment, I'm going to watch this commercial for Night Glow Racing from Tyco, of course.
Now, turn out the lights, and Tyco's Night Glow shines like outer space itself. New Super Cliffhangers with Night Glow from Tyco, of course.
Of course.
But I suppose we really should see who wins in a battle of Prime versus electricity. So let's get back to it. After all, Prime does has rubber tires on him.
That's true. I'm just praying that this isn't like we're not getting an early dose of Kremzeek. That's going to be the end of this one. So we do the thing again where it's like we see him about to die, and then after we come back from commercial break, it's like he's just about to die again, right? So he's hurtling towards the beams.
And Gears, in an attempt to shut down the energy, shoots one of the surrounding spheres. And it seems to be enough as the energy grid is temporarily broken, and Prime falls to ground relatively unscathed. And then the electricity shoots around randomly, separating a grappling Ironhide and Starscream. Megatron takes revenge on Gears' action by transforming and landing in Soundwave's hand, same shot, and blasting Gears quite some ways away. Megatron retransforms and demands the Autobots throw down their weapons or else he'll blast Prime. The Autobots all drop their weapons, and Megatron proclaims, "The universe is mine."
This isn't the first time he said that. However, Megatron, you have 3 Seekers, Soundwave, maybe a couple tapes, and Gears. How are you going to round up all these Autobots and hold them? Let's not get ahead of ourselves on this one, Megatron, but I get it. You like to gloat, and you like to celebrate. I mean, he I guess deep down he does have there's a cheerfulness to Megatron, isn't there? He's got like that devilish giggle, and then he's always like raising the roof with his hands when things are going good, you know? So, yeah. I mean,
there's definitely glee to what he does.
Yeah. So let's hang on to that before we get to season 3. Yeah, the universe is mine. So now what?
Prime again tries to convince Megatron that his weapon is going to make the sun explode, but Megatron says fake news, or rather that he doesn't have time for Prime's fairy tales. He demands Gears repair the Solar Needle, who says happy to be of service, still feeling those positive vibes. And Prime tries to convince Gears otherwise, but Megatron reminds Gears that he asked for a favor, and Gears won't disappoint him, will he?
Well, no, I wouldn't want you to feel bad.
What did you do to Gears, you monster? You turned him nice.
I do like this line by Ironhide.
That is a fantastic line. You turned him nice.
And he says it with like such disgust in his voice. Like, oh my God, what have you done? I do like Megatron's, or rather Frank Welker's delivery of like, Gears, maybe a promise. Don't want to disappoint me, do you? Like he does it with that Megatron like gravel, right? But he's basically being like the smarmy boss. Oh.
So Megatron essentially explains about the circuit and how removing it has made Gears his slave. Prime again warns Megatron that things are about to get very blow-uppy, and Megatron orders the Seekers to take aim at Prime. And Prime here asks for one last request, and Megatron grants it. Why does Megatron grant this? I don't really see Megatron as a really honorable villain. Remember back a few episodes ago,
Heavy Metal War.
Yeah, Starscream was like, you wouldn't want to cheat, would you? And Megatron was like, I want to win.
What's that John Cusack movie, One Crazy Summer, where the dad says the only way to win, Theodore, is to cheat. Yeah, that's Megatron, right? I will win by any means at any cost, even if it means terminating you, Starscream. And now Optimus like, will you grant a mechanism one last request?
Yeah, he says, fine, just be quick about it.
But yeah, why would he do this? Because like also, Optimus isn't a dummy, you know? Like Megatron knows this by now. He's not of all the Autobots, whatever you want to say about the different Autobots, Cliffjumper, etc. Optimus he's not dumb. So if he asks for that, he's probably up to something. Megatron, sloppy.
Yeah. The only thing I land on is that Megatron is so confident. His confidence is his Achilles heel.
Yeah.
And when he thinks his plan is going perfectly, he's always 100% sold on it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't think anything could possibly mess things up at this point.
Yeah, or it could be that he's underestimating his enemy's compassion, like saying like, oh, he's going to ask me to like let the Autobots go, or make sure that Bumblebee's named the leader of the Autobots because he should be. You know, and Megatron's like, yeah, you can say whatever you want. I'm still going to murder you and not fulfill your promise. And that's going to bring me great joy. It could be that, right?
Yeah. Well, Prime's last request is to ask Gears if he'd do him a favor.
That's a
and
great
Gears
line, too.
says he thought he'd never ask, and then he shoots one of the spheres of the Solar Needle. It again unleashes electric blasts all around, sending everyone scattering. Bumblebee celebrates Gears being back on their side as Prime orders everyone to attack the Decepticons. So basically, Prime didn't ask his favor. Gears just knew what it was and did it. And somehow this basically puts Gears on the side of the Autobots again. Okay.
Yeah, actually, this kind of like cuts off the legs of the argument that I was making earlier, that this is really about like managing your feelings, because like one of the problems is he's so agreeable now that like anybody who asks him for something, he'll just do it. But then he's starting to feel conflicted about it. Like, do I like being a slave? Wait a minute, Autobots aren't slaves. Maybe there's something more to this than the way I'm feeling right now. But how do you solve the problem? Just ask him to do something for you, because he can't resist being. It's like he's got no boundaries and he's super agreeable right now. Oh, okay. Like it should have been that crisis. Gears should definitely be the person to solve the crisis. There's no question about that. But from a writer's standpoint, you can see how they would arrive at that being the way that the problem gets solved, but it should be Gears should have to overcome more. Like in Fire in the Sky, when Skyfire says, "I will not, they have done no wrong," and then Starscream shoots him. You know, it's like that moment feels big because it's his decision to defy all the reason in front of him as to why he should be. And he's operating purely on his own principle, because he doesn't even have the evidence of that Starscream's right or the Autobots are right. He doesn't know, but he has to decide for himself. And that moment feels huge because of that. This is just like, yeah, hey, Gears, will you do me a favor? Okay. And it doesn't feel like it's Gears' victory at all. You know, so like, yeah, it feels like the story lost its way around the time when the Autobots arrived at the Solar Needle.
Yeah, and things are so vague as to what's happening. We have to have Bumblebee kind of explain it and say, Gears is back on the Autobot side again.
Yeah,
like,
a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we see everyone face off: Prime versus Megatron, Ratchet versus Thundercracker. By the way, Ratchet karate kicks Thundercracker into a tree.
Whoa.
I don't know. He's apparently watching a lot of different YouTube videos, maybe some karate ones. We see Wheeljack square off against Skywarp and Gears versus Starscream. And Gears actually manages to swing Starscream around like 720 degrees, throwing him into Soundwave.
Poor Soundwave. He is not having a great day.
Oh, this is not a good day for him. And after all this thrashing, all the Decepticons take to the air, abandoning Megatron to the Autobots. So Prime puts quite the beating on him, ending with kicking him into the air, at which point Megatron cuts his losses and flies away as well. Lots of Autobot kicking in this episode.
It'd be interesting to see this guy's other scripts, episodes written by him, to see if there's kicking in those as well. I think about Robbie London, who wrote a lot of Masters of the Universe episodes, has repeatedly talked about how he was a big fan of Zorro growing up, and he got to write the Zorro cartoon, and so he loved the sword play in He-Man as a result of that. He tried to write it in because he loved Zorro. So it's you have to wonder what writers' influences are making it into this and how. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if this guy, when he was at home, kicked boulders all the time.
I also wondered if maybe it was like a way to get around censors. Like censors maybe said, okay, you can't have characters punching each other in the face because children could replicate that at home. So no punching.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, well, they didn't say anything about kicking.
And karate kicking at that, right? This isn't like Megatron's laying on the ground and Optimus runs up to him, kicks him in the stomach kind of thing. Like that is something a kid could do on a playground. But like a karate kicking a person to a tree, a little harder to pull off.
Oh, I just see the censors coming back. It's like, why are you having these characters kick each other? I said they couldn't have contact like that. It's like, no, you said no punching.
Yeah, that's right. I gotcha. And they're like, "Doo," and they walk out of the room. If only every argument were won that way.
So according to Prime's estimates, the sun is going to now explode in less than a minute. So the Earth around them is quaking and getting more and more unstable. We see the spheres surrounding the needle begin crashing down, and one almost smashes Wheeljack, but another well-timed kick from Ratchet sends a boulder up to impact the sphere.
Oh my gosh!
Before it can land on Wheeljack.
He was really the soccer.
Wheeljack was the star on the Autobot soccer team.
But Ratchet kicks a boulder. Oh my gosh. It's just weird how that's just a theme in this one. Okay.
Yeah, that's what you have to do. Say okay and move on. So then Prime, Ratchet, and Wheeljack rip their way into the inner controls of the needle and find that there's 2 wires present.
Oh, this part's fun.
This old gag.
Yeah.
Of course, Wheeljack and Ratchet have opposite ideas about which one of the wires should be cut. So Prime makes a guess. And the Earth is atomized by an exploding sun, and we pull back to see it's all been taking place in a snow globe owned by Partly and Cloudy.
What?
No, I mean, Prime pulled the right wire,
and
the needle shuts down, and the Autobots celebrate, and the Earth doesn't go boom. So the sun returns to normal instantly. It's not this slow process. It's just like, normal now.
Yeah.
And the earthquakes stop, and it was all fixed by severing one wire.
Okay, so let's back up 3 steps. One of the things we've observed is this series, especially in season 1, tended to not be very funny. It was very grim in its approach. It was very serious. So we didn't get a lot of like what I would call jokes in the first series. There's like light moments, but not like moments that are meant to be funny. But when 2 characters say something in unison, it's usually like to emphasize or to like deliver some kind of like funny moment. And this moment feels like this was like a really good use of that, where like they open the panel, there's 2 wires, and Wheeljack and Ratchet are like, one of them says like, oh, that's simple, all we need to do is, and they both point at the same time at the wires, each pointing a different wire, and they say in unison, disconnect that wire, you know. Mm-hmm. This, again, with the aging down of the series, which again is a speculation on our part, which maybe will get confirmed eventually, that kind of moment feels more possible as compared to, like, that doesn't feel like it could have fit in like episode 9 of the series, you know. But then like Optimus just like doing like working from the gut and just ripping a wire out, it just happens to be the right one, also feels like the most fundamentally 80s hero kind of thing to do, you know. It's like Arthur Fonzarelli hitting the jukebox and it just works, you know. It's that kind of thing. And it's another thing that I feel like is of its time, and I find it charming for what it is, but I feel like that doesn't make it to 2020 like intact, you know. Like a hero couldn't do that today. It would feel completely tone deaf, right?
And it just seems like that whole one of these wires that's going to save us, the other is going to blow us up. It just seems like that's a hugely repetitive trope that's been used a million times. But I would love to see, like, what are the origins of that trope? Where did it come from? And where did it all get used? I'm sure it was in MacGyver like every other episode. But, like, where else has this thing been used?
Yeah. I don't know the origin of it. And if any of the listeners want to tell us, it's 4 million years later at gmail.com. We can bring it to a future episode when we do the season 2 wrap up. So Optimus saved the world again by just working from his gut, and dust your hands and go home.
Gears comes up to Prime and asks if he isn't forgetting something. And Prime pulls his circuit card out of the needle and hands it back to Gears. And then Trailbreaker interjects.
Just a minute. We took a vote and, well, we decided we like Gears the way he is now.
Yeah, a real photovoltaic pussycat.
I see. Well, as long as you all agree.
Hey, if you guys don't give me my circuit back, I'm gonna start kicking Transistor.
All right, Gears, don't get your capacitors in an uproar. There.
So, when do we roll out of here? This jungle humidity is giving me a cramp in my chronometer.
Hey, now that's our gears.
And my pulleys are squeaking again.
All right, let's blast that solar needle and roll out.
Yeah, I do like the line of photovoltaic pussycat. I like a moment of warmth. We talked about this in Countdown to Extinction, like seeing the Decepticons doing something when Megatron's not around. Like and we've both like said like how we really enjoy watching the characters just interact with one another, like not related to a mission. And this feels like the closest we're gonna get to Autobots doing that is them just like sort of giving each other the business a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
and then we see the Autobots a safe distance away from the Solar Needle as Prime has Gears push the plunger on a very stereotypical kind of explosive device you'd see in old cartoons. Again, another trope.
Yeah, it really is.
And then the Solar Needle and surrounding spheres all explode. Bumblebee bets that Gears got a bang out of that, which sets off Gears to complain about everything for such a length that everyone transforms and drives away while he's still complaining. Then Gears does the typical, "Hey, wait for me" routine. And the episode is done.
Yeah, so Gears turns around and says like, "Oh, you have any idea what the vibration of something like that can do to your system?" And then he starts like it just like cascades into a series of physical complaints, things that are wrong with his body that he wants to tell everybody about. He doesn't want it fixed. He just wants you to understand the pain he endures every day. We all have a friend like that, right? And yeah, like the Autobot's just like, "All right, let's just drive home." But I also have to take issue with Megatron made a super weapon. There's resources in that super weapon. Do we like dismantle it carefully and maybe like see what we can learn from what Megatron accomplished here? Maybe repurpose some of these different components for different things back at the Ark? No, we blow it up. Oh my gosh.
And not only do they not take it apart and see if it could be repurposed, they just blow it up and then just leave the mess
and
there.
Then just drive away.
Like, bye.
Yes. And never mind the fact that we've already talked about how there's living things here. We saw a stampede of zebras earlier. Who knows what kind of creatures live here? Who knows what kind of waste materials are in like Megatron's solar needle machinery, which we don't even have to get that far into the weeds on. Just the fact they made a mess and they went home. Is that what we do, Autobots?
Like, hey, we stopped Megatron's plan. We don't have to clean up after him, too.
Yeah, Bumblebee's like, "Prime, shouldn't we clean this up? Do you see Spike anywhere?" No? All right, then. I'm sticking to my theory because, yeah, no Spike, Sparkplug, or Chip Chase means Autobots behave kind of badly.
I can picture, like, Prime back in the base. He's like, "Yeah, and then I looked at Gears, and I just wanted to smack his..." And then Spike walks in, and I just wanted to congratulate him on being such a wonderful Autobot.
See, but this is almost worse. Is they're not that bad, right? They're just like a little bad. They're just like a little undisciplined and not as conscientious when the humans aren't around, right? Like Prime doesn't turn into like a full on jerk. He just turns into like. He drops his trash on the ground. What are you doing? Huh? Oh, sorry. And he picks it up. Or he murders a tree.
Not just a tree, like 5 minutes worth of trees.
Yes. So, I mean, like, great looking episode. Again, the first 2/3, I feel like set up a really interesting kind of story for young people. Mm-hmm. But it kind of loses its way in the third act. And just problematic stuff with how the Autobots solve their problems in this one. I feel like there's more of this coming. Think about like Transformers Prime, Optimus Prime. He would not shoot a tree. There's no way he would shoot a tree. Trees get hurt in Transformers Prime, but I don't ever see anything living like get harmed at the hands of Optimus.
Yeah, it seems to come too easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there wasn't any. It's like, how are we going to get through here? It wasn't like, well, we can't possibly wreck all these trees. It's like it's happening. It's just like, shoot them, burn them, get them out of the way.
And again, like going back to my childhood, I think that was probably a very appealing scene to me as a child, right? Because like you go from He-Man when we were littler kids, which, what was I? I was like 8. And so you would have been like 6 when that came out. Yeah. And like those stories, He-Man, like they literally would have written a scene where he would be like, well, we got to find a way to go around these trees because I don't want anything to get hurt. Like he says that almost every episode, like there's one episode where he's fighting a giant scorpion. He's like, it's going to take all my strength to stop that thing, but I don't want to hurt it. It's like he always says it out loud to the kids. I don't want to hurt anything. And then like, okay, now I'm 11, right? And now it's like, it's the 80s. A lot of our action heroes all solve their problems by punching a guy. So it feels visceral, it feels thrilling, it feels cathartic to watch them mow down a forest, And it would have felt, for my 11-year-old self, I'm sure it would have felt awkward and pandering to have Optimus say something like, well, let's see if we can find a better way around this thing. Middle-aged Jersey would be like, oh, that would have made my heart melt. Oh, he's teaching kids ethics.
I mean, let's just touch on the fact that they didn't have to put in the tree obstacle at all.
No,
it's like they chose to put that in there.
Yeah, and that makes this episode, I feel like this one's really rooted in its time, because that feels so early to mid 80s action hero Snake Plissken mowing down the room. Again, I go back to like Roddy Piper in They Live, that scene in the bank, right? Which is like, in that context, it's a different kind of story. It's like a very cathartic scene, and it's also kind of funny in the cognitive dissonance of, well, the humans in the bank don't realize what's really happening here, but we, the viewers, know what he's really doing, But like, this is a kid's cartoon. This is a different thing altogether. So yeah, it feels intentionally over the top, like fist pumping celebratory, like pro wrestling, macho aggression is what that scene feels like to me now,
I am a real American, punching down trees all that I can.
Yeah. Oh, that's the new song that we're going to write to go along with this episode. Any other observations you want to make about this one? How do you feel about it, given that we get so few Decepticons actually saying and doing stuff? It's like basically Megatron and Starscream show.
That makes it a bummer, because it just seems like the Decepticons are just there to be extra arms and legs for Megatron, which is kind of their role to begin with, but it's always more enjoyable when they sass while they do it, or, little things happen, like Rumble does something cute, something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's just like they're just there in very generic adversarial roles in this episode. I love that the spotlight got shown on Gears for this one time. Mm-hmm. We will see him again, but he'll be in the background just about every time.
Yeah.
So this is Gears' one time to shine, and it's very great in that way. I love the idea of the script. It's very, very cute and fun. Mm-hmm. But it would have been better if the Decepticons could have, been a bit more involved than just carrying Energon cubes.
Yeah, and there was room for that to happen. If we took out the macho scene of tree slaughter, we could have had a scene where Thundercracker and Skywarp just cut away to mid-conversation with the two of them while they're doing something, right?
Yeah. Just have Rumble and Frenzy there loading up cubes, and have them doing it in a cute way because they're so small, just something.
Yeah.
But it's just like the Decepticons who are just there to be the adversaries.
Yeah.
They weren't really treated like characters. I mean, Starscream wasn't even doing his typical Starscream stuff.
No. Hail mighty Megatron.
So it just feels odd from a Decepticon standpoint, but I love that Gears finally got a spot to shine in.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this isn't one of my very favorite episodes, but I feel like we did a good job of like looking at it very carefully and seriously.
Yeah.
And joyfully at the same time. So
Gears was my first mini-bot, so it kind of holds a little bit of a special place.
Well, I guess if I were to close, I think it's also nice to show, again, I'm always thinking about like, is it good for young people that, that grumpy person in your life, maybe that's the preferred state. Maybe some people are just kind of grumpy sometimes, and and cheering them up, quote unquote, isn't necessarily the path to goodness. Maybe like accepting them for who they are is the correct answer, and let them decide who they're going to be, which is where I thought it was going when he's like, oh, I love being a slave, or do I? Right.
Mm-hmm. And as a grumpy person, I approve that message.
as somebody who spent a very, very large chunk of his life talking to a grumpy person.
I wonder who Jersey means.
All right. Well, I think we did it. So thank you for this episode, Hoover. It was fun revisiting this one with you. And let's see, we record what once a week. The shows drop on Thursdays. And there'll be all sorts of like links that are going to be mentioned in the outro music. But if you're enjoying the show, consider giving us a review on one of the different pod places you listen to podcasts, or tell a friend you know who likes Transformers. Actually, a close friend of mine in the comic industry recently said to me, your show makes me feel smarter for loving Transformers so much. So if you know somebody who doesn't understand why you love Transformers so much, maybe point them at one of these episodes.
Because we're awesome.
Well, we like talking about Transformers. I'll just leave it at that. All right. So thanks, Hoof. I'll see you next time.
Well, speaking of next time,
next
episode we're going to be covering is City of Steel.
Oh, no.
Well, we'll see.
All right. I don't have good memories of this episode.
I don't, mostly.
Okay.
But I think I'm going to talk about a little trick you can play on yourself to enjoy it a little bit more. Maybe.
Oh, okay.
So we'll talk about that next time. City of Steel.
All right. Until then, I've been Jersey Drozd of 4millionyearslater.com and Jersey Drozd on Instagram.
And I've been Unchanging Hoover.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Episode synopses are from imdb.com and some episode information taken from tfwiki.net. The closing theme is by Nick Mihalik, based on the original closing theme by Ford Kinder and Ann Bryant. You can find more of Nick's music at soundcloud.com/Nicholas-Mihalik.
That's spelled NICHOLAS-MEHALICK.
Find us on Facebook under 4 Million Years Later, and you can email us at 4millionyearslater@gmail.com.
Visit 4millionyearslater.com, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. You know how it works.